Okay, welcome to another edition of the Business Buzz. I'm your host, Jeff Sherman. We have our co-host, Chris Calandra, and our new format, or not so new format, Chris. Chris has been the co-host for now going on several months. And maybe you can talk a little bit to our viewing audience about how this show has transformed a little bit before you came on, formally as the co-host. But in your mind, maybe you can share it with our viewers who might be thinking, what's going on here with the business, but how it's changed and how it still relates to business.
I think it's changed because at least recently we've had fewer guests that are the small business kind of personality and moved to more format where you and I are talking about the business of the day. And I think that's timely in my opinion, and I think you share it, is that so much of what's going on in small, mid-sized business, even the stock market, is so driven by what state governments are doing and the federal government is doing, that it's not just about what widget you're making or anything like that. The major topic of the day is really the role of government, state and federal, in our lives, both individual lives, personal lives, but especially in business. And I think that's how it plays into the business buzz, because that overlays on everything else, what the government, state and federal is going to do. I
agree with that, and it's well put, very succinct, and I think it just goes into a bigger picture that, things have changed on the business buzz, because when we first started, the economy was in better shape. People had more of an interest if you invented the greatest, Kawakazing widget, but when you're either out of work, in between jobs, underemployed, or scared about losing your job or your entrepreneurial endeavor, Billy Bob coming on with his great widget isn't all that attractive, is it?
Absolutely. And I think if you talk to most small business owners, and that's really what I do in my day job. I was with longtime clients of mine last night, and they own a business, and it's a common refrain. They talk, Jeff, about, how business is as fun as it used to be. The regulations, there's bureaucracy. It's tougher to find good help. The government's on their butt about this, that, or the other thing.
Can I interject something? Because that's really interesting to me. Because everything in life is a snapshot. You had, really probably around 13% unemployment, really, okay? But, and I read, God, time flies, 15 years ago, but the coming freight train, that was going to be the huge labor shortage. So it's interesting to me as more baby boomers retire because of their 401ks are doing better, the economy's doing a little better. I wonder if there's not going to be a skilled labor shortage in this country. Those unskilled, we got plethoras of that. I mean, we got that coming out of our ears. But real skilled labor with a traditional work ethic, I think is going to be a little bit more in short supply.
I think, you take this client, and I won't name his business, but it's an auto body shop, and he's got a lot of guys that have been with him a very long time, and they're approaching retirement age, and he can't find younger people that have any kind of useful skill set or interest in actually being in the auto body business, which is far from glamorous. So I think that you can make a pretty good case that there's certainly certain industries where there's not enough supply of good employees, and there's other industries where there's oversupply. And there's a tremendous disconnect.
It's more
and
fluid.
It's not just skilled and unskilled, because talk to most tradesmen, electricians, plumbers, auto body shop, kind of the skilled trades, there's a tremendous shortage. I know a good friend of mine.
Why is that, though? Because, I mean, if I had a son, being a little sexist here, and I'll say a daughter too, but I don't think it's a bad strategy. I'm a big believer in college.
Yes.
Go to a 4-year college, get a degree in business, whatever you want, and then go to become an electrician. Not a bad gig.
Yes. I think it ties into what we talked about in the last show with the education system being so geared to the white-collar education. Go to the public school, go to college, get a college degree. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't get a college degree, or even if you get a college degree, it's considered like down level to be in the trades, like an electrician and plumbing. It's held in a lower regard in most circles, especially at the college level. And so you have a shortage. But I know, and you probably know, a lot of skilled tradesmen that are also good business people that make a very nice living and build nice businesses.
And
there's nothing wrong with it.
No one's breathing down your neck as an electrician.
Yes.
And I think it's a great strategy. Like I said, I do believe in a college education is something I always, because I think it makes you more well-rounded, more erudite on various matters. Go to college, you get out when you're 22, go into the trades, and then let's say by the time you're 35 and you're getting a little older, or let's say 40, then you start, you're the owner, you're the skilled person, but you have other people working for you, you subcontract out, and you have a great business. The flip side of that, you get out of college, you become a marketing manager, you get your job, 5 years, doing well, then you're 30, then you maybe get your first layoff, then your third layoff, and maybe electricians looking a little more glamorous.
Absolutely. So I think that there's a shortage there, and I think it could, and it's anecdotal, be explained away that most American families, middle American families, they envision their children and the school systems that those school children are participating in view them as white-collar, marketing,
but does that
middle
get into
management,
the whole
corporate
thing that everyone gets an award? Absolutely.
I think that does.
I mean, because, you look, and college has been overdone. I mean, I think college has somewhere to go, or has fallen back a little bit on some of the hard skills. Looking at some of the work students put out, it's a little alarming. I mean, so it's almost like crap falls downhill, and this place uphill. That you start out with rotting in the public schools. The rot's starting to follow up in our what was once our sanctuary in America, that is higher education. That's not so much of a bargain either.
Absolutely. So, when I started talking about this client with the auto body shop and what their comments to me last night were, and that's pretty common, and almost all of those things tie into what the state and federal government is doing, trying to do, intending to do, or unintended consequences. So that's really how it plays in the business. The role of government is central to everything, and it's not just an auto body shop. Talk to a law firm, a white-collar kind of...
But where's our Department of Education started under Carter? These people are supposedly know what they're doing, which I don't take any, I don't believe that, for a second, from almost any of our elected and unelected officials. Why aren't they having, instead of No Child Left Behind, forcing the round peg into the square hole, why don't they have, and being a disservice to those kids, because you're pushing kids along that aren't really scholastically inclined, have, a scholastic portion of the training, but like they do in other countries, Germany in particular, train a student, a young person that maybe he or she's more hands-on and likes doing, working with their hands, likes doing things, with electricity and stuff like that. And they could have a great life, a great career, but you're forcing them to measure up to an idea that they're not really have an inclination or an interest to pursue, or maybe the capabilities to do.
Yes. And when you tie it into the economy, the Department of Education, one thing that you would think that they might want to do is say, well, here's the needs of the country. We need engineers. We need technology people, we need plumbers, we need electricians, we need doctors. But, we're very much caught up into, Jeffrey, you're a student, whatever you want to do, you need to be happy, and not really trying to drive people into the industries that are desirable at an economic level and where we have shortages.
Yeah, and but that's what we talked about, thinking strategically. Our government bureaucracy has no ability to think strategically. And that would be, look, Chris, you're not in the Department of Education. What you just said makes a lot of sense. Why don't they have people, you have a certain population base, okay, you have certain gaps in terms of skilled employment. Well, why don't we develop programs to fill the gaps? You do the math. That might bring your unemployment down a point or two.
Yes.
Hello?
Now, I know this is anecdotal, but I was speaking with somebody over the weekend, and they were a public school teacher, and he was in the mathematics department, and he was talking to somebody else that was in the history department in a public school, like high school kind of setting. And basically, the math teacher was saying that he could get away with bending more of the rules because there's a shortage of math teachers, where the history teacher and I don't know this to be true, but it makes sense to me, is the history teacher has to toe the line much more evenly, because as they said, history teachers a dime a dozen. They could swap that history teacher out and you could go find a history teacher
like
off the street.
In a minute. Yeah.
And that's not really a terrific way to allocate resources in the country, where you read that there's a coming shortage of medical doctors, there's a shortage of engineers, higher end IT is often going overseas because companies can't find as many of those employees domestically in the United States. But there doesn't seem to be any concerted effort to try and bring people into the most economically viable and economically needed parts of the U.S. economy. Instead, the higher education system in the U.S., they simply want to sell people and come into school there. They don't care whether you sell something that you could get that you take a degree. It doesn't matter whether you'll be able to get a job or not afterwards. They just want you to go to the school and pay the tuition.
Oh, there's no question about it. Like I've basically seen situations where I'm not going to name schools that you would be shocked that they're paying $50,000 a year for lesbian studies. Now,
yes.
Read a couple books on lesbian stuff if that interests you. Fine by me, but I don't know. Chris, you're really heavily in the area of economics. What would be the demand for someone with skills in lesbian studies?
It's going to be very limited. It's going to be very shallow. And I would say if you're spending $55,000 a year for 4 years to study that your economic payoff, you might feel fulfilled. You might feel good about yourself. It might be something you're tremendously interested in. But just playing the statistics, you are not going to get good value out of that money you're spending on that education.
School, schools are basically is a business. Just because it says nonprofit, that and 30 cents will get you a cup of coffee. They want to fill the seats.
Right.
And, I made the joke about lesbians, which is actually true. But even in a more realistic sense, a lot of these schools, state schools, private schools, cranking out marketing managers.
Yes.
With no counseling in terms of Fred, Nancy, I love marketing. I know you love marketing, but I just want to, here's the facts, okay?
Yes.
You make an informed decision that, there is 100 people for every marketing job.
Yes.
And you may want to think about maybe having marketing as your minor, and maybe study biology. This is, so you could actually have a hard skill, maybe work for a biotech company with a marketing flair. That's highly marketable. No pun intended. But just the world does not need another marketing manager.
Do you think that's going on in higher education?
No,
not at all.
Because
there's
they know
no incentive. There's no demand from customers and families to do that. There's no demand from the government top down to urge education institutions do that. They're just, like you said, they're getting a tuition to get the fanny and the seats. Whatever you want to, you're interested in that, we could give a course on that. And that's all well and good. If that's what families and people want to spend their money on, that's okay. But to think you're going to get economic value out of that, and that's necessarily in the best interest of the U.S. economy is suspect.
Well, I'll even say, I'll kind of flip on what I think, because I made the kind of somewhat of a joke, but it was an actual situation. I think that would be a little bit of an extreme, a little bit too narrow of a field. But I think actually, I'm almost the other side. I think schools have gone to the other tantrum, end of the spectrum, I should say, and that is they were once for higher education. That's what they weren't a trade school. And I think that, for me, I think a liberal arts degree from a good school is really trash now. It has not a lot of value. Should have an awful lot of value. It's things like, you should get like your liberal arts degree you'd want. If I was going to hire a young person.
Yes.
Going in a little bit of a, crazy subject area, it'd be a little weird. But someone who, let's say, went to a good school, a Trinity, and had a liberal arts degree and was buttoned down, straight ahead looking person, right? And they're obviously well-read, they can write, they can communicate. What a great person to